So far on the channel there's been a whole host of adventures into standout titles and RPG classics, but today we take a look into a game that is not only miles and miles from its adored competition, but actually rated as the lowest scoring MMO on various mainstay rating services, racking up a terrifying 1.7 user score on Metacritic. But surely there must be some redeeming features of this MMO, especially after so many years of continued development. Oh, good God. So it's gonna be like that, is it? Today, we take a look at the worst rated MMO on the planet, Infestation: Survivor Stories. When first booting up the game, we are greeted with an eyeball-melting amount of information around the game's features, including of course its available and purchasable skins. The game itself is split into 4 different modes, but with my time with the game only allowing to getting into the survival mode due to lack of players for the other modes. I have said modes too many times. Apologies for going into mode. And it's to the survival mode where our adventure begins, not before getting a chance to be sold some more of the game's microtransactions, including hilariously gems such as a whole set of rust-ridden armor and weapons featured in the Season Pass, which almost feels like a practical joke, with words such as not usable and it hardly shoots scribbled on top of them. Sign me up immediately! Taking our first steps into the game's tutorial, what is a new one for me is the choice to equip all new characters with a pair of Heelys, to allow them to glide across the landscape like a skinhead Bambi, a sight that will surely strike fear into the hearts of our enemies. And after being asked to gather some supplies and try out some weaponry, we are introduced to the game's zombie types, to get us accustomed to the open world, featuring a number of stronger enemy types to watch out for, and on our way getting of course a glimpse into the patented T-pose variety. Next up are the options for travel, featuring an ATV that's so massive that if Ozzy Osbourne had fallen off this, that I'm sure would have caused some kind of natural disaster on the other side of the globe, in addition to the falling of stock of Jack Daniels. With the tutorial complete, we get our first level and dive straight into the game's open world. Infestation includes, as you would imagine, quite a small map for its world, with a number of camps and events cropping up for chances at rewards, as well as a day-night cycle to add to its survival elements, shown here as soon as we begin with the sun going down. But fear not, we happen to have a much-needed flashlight to make up for the sudden plunge into darkness. Why did I think that was going to work? After fucking around and finding out with some nearby survivor NPCs, we are presented with another of the game's more unfriendly features, with a lockout timer before we're even able to spawn again, almost as if the game itself is encouraging me to break free from its nonsense. But endeavor we must, and as the sun begins to rise, we sneak past another terrifying zombie threat to one of the game's urban areas and begin gearing up and looting the area, and finding a much needed melee weapon that when holstered gives away the game's clear collaboration with flex tape, sticking all manner of objects no matter how large onto us for easy access. Infestation will be familiar to anyone who's played titles such as DayZ or H1Z1 back in the day, with its focus on survival and battling against the undead hordes, with the game also adopting tropes typically associated with MMORPGs, such as its mission system where a task can be found out in the world and open invitations sent out to players who wish to join you in completing the challenge. Others include its events and trading systems, which we unfortunately will get a chance to take a look at a little later on. It's hard to tell whether that's a zombie or just a wicked hangover. The game's combat, has to be said, is quite indicative of its tragic review score, with the melee combat making zombies feel like they are also inflatable as well as being undead, coupled with a masterful lack of audible footsteps made by your enemies, leading to frequent sucker punches and jump scares. No, jumping Jehoshaphat! And the enemies themselves taking a massive leap from insanely flimsy to towering walking death on the turn of a corner, leading to either having a team made up of likely only a handful of players, or leading to yet another death and pile of dropped junk and flex tape. Like with most open-world survival MMOs, Infestation features its own crafting system, which allows for creating traps, armors, and a range of DIY modes of destruction, reminiscent of games like Dead Island and Dying Light, while also having a pretty wide range of conventional weapons to find or trade for out in the world, slowly adding to the player's vault found in the survivor settlements, copied and pasted locations populated by NPCs dressed as players, running around like confused cattle, and outfitted in all sorts of typical zombie-crushing weaponry. Okay, yep. That is a banana. The player settlements having shops and allowing for stored loot items to either sell or use at a later date, and even ATMs for depositing funds while exploring, dropped from the seemingly incredibly wealthy local population. After gearing and leveling up for a while, the time was right to take a look at a few of the game's open world events, starting off by taking on one of the NPC bandit camps, and like with a lot of experiences in Infestation, on paper sounds cool, but ends up being incredibly underwhelming, taking out a handful of dumb as rocks bandit NPCs, only to lead to less ammo, a couple of minor upgrades, and PTSD of being panhandled. Jesus! Whoa! Next, after reaching into the wilderness, a helicopter crash was sighted nearby, and carefully creeping up to the site, picking off the surrounding zombies and scrotum hounds. Emerged victorious and revelled in our victory, eagerly hunting for our reward of absolutely bugger all, except yet again leaving highly confused and with even less ammo than before. Taking out another bandit camp, we come across a rare sight in Infestation, that being one of its vehicles. Now, I may or may not have a bit of a reputation for possibly or possibly not leading to the destruction of various vehicles in cooperative games. But this time shall be different, and I will make sure to time the lifespan of this very one to prove it, as we use it to explore the game's largest city right in the centre of the map, whilst on the way getting to see another rare sight, that of the game being somewhat consistent, with the driving also feeling like trying to ride a skateboard using nothing but my face. Arriving at the city, we set to work mowing down hordes of the undead, whilst an argument breaks out in the game's chat, more on that in a moment, only to be challenged by a towering special zombie bastard, and after a failed attempt at an escape, ends up pummeling us to death. Squabbling in the chat was oddly quite a frequent occurrence with my time with this game, but then again, after playing it for 10 hours or so now, makes all the more sense, considering how bored and frustrated the players must get. I was even at one point, after only requesting that someone wanting their stolen car back, screaming in the chat, provide the accompanying proof of ownership, was served and rightfully put in my place, being told to slam and boil for my foolish teasing. Oh, sorry, what? But this most recent argument had gone on for quite some time, so decided to take a look where the players were saying all of this nonsense was going down, and as I should have come to expect, was only let down even when trying to seek out something funny to witness, with some tit just standing in the doorway to one of the game's vaults, locking a number of players in and everyone else out. And while we're on the subject of distributing some player frustration, a look into a massively multiplayer experience like this would not be complete without some player versus player action. As mentioned earlier, attempting to join any of the game's modes outside of survival will be greeted with a crash, a forever timer, or a lobby that for a moment charged the old flattery battery thinking I was with other players. But soon became obvious that I'd yet again been duped by this game's utter absurdity. But I would not be beaten so easily, so jumping into the most populated PvP server I could find, set out to test my mettle against the players roaming the lands, and the players listed looking to be quite the ensemble of ruthless assassins, making my chosen name all the more on point. Prowling around for what felt like an age, taking on camps of NPCs, making sure to be as loud as possible, and even getting another chance to redeem myself travelling around in a souped-up cop car. Alas, I struggled to find a firefight. I even joined a group just to get the player's location, not before seeing that they were miles away and getting a look at an interesting quirk with the grouping system. When choosing to leave player groups, the game will make both parties just sit there while still grouped after announcing a particular player is leaving.
So basically, what I was thinking of was...
leading to an awkward countdown with both of us still in the chat, wondering what went wrong.
Fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
Travelling for miles, it felt like the quest for a shootout was doomed, and the decision was made to make a final loot around in one of the larger towns, before admitting defeat, when... Yes, I did it, finally! Safe to say, the zombies roaming the land are more alive than this game's PvP, which is a shame because there are actually some mechanics to make it interesting, such as clans being able to claim various places around the land, encouraging territory warfare. And of course we had to check it out, making my way down to a claimed area. All I needed to do was destroy the flag, as it was vulnerable, to claim it for myself, and for at least some form of win. Okay, why did I think that was going to work? Which kind of says it all with my time with this game, one that feels almost like a waiting room for a real open world massively multiplayer experience. Finding cards to access better loot, making some of the game's more interesting weapons, and trudging across its lifeless open world feels pretty much like just enough of an actual game to attempt to justify its various offerings of microtransactions. The game does feature a leveling system as well as skill points to spend, but good luck getting too far with it, as with only a short time in the game feel like I've seen it all. But then again, I don't really know what I was expecting from a game that has literally the lowest MMO score ever. I'm sure there are worse games out there, but at least most of those don't offer anything that could attract a player base to begin with, as opposed to Infestation that does just enough of emulating features of much more popular games to sucker players into their silly, undead shenanigans. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm keen to get your thoughts down in the comments, and if you know of any absolute trash fires of MMOs, do feel free to let me know, and we may have to pay a visit to those too. I want to give a massive shout out to the channel members who help in supporting the channel. If you're interested in joining as a channel member for all sorts of perks including exclusive videos, the info is down in the description. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Shit! Jesus, calm down! Oh dear lord, what have I done? Standing upon his steed like a Segne, the former being mostly due to his reputation of being slightly less than accurate with his spells for unknown reasons.